Hi guys, how you doing? Someone mentioned Yellowstone to me the other day in a video that I'd uploaded and said, you should really have a look into it. Now, I'm aware, as most people are, because there's plenty of channels that cover earthquakes, and the activity with regards to those in and around Yellowstone. I'm not overly concerned about that just yet because they're very they're not serious earthquakes. They're around about, I think the worst one that's been there, this is off the top of my head, so don't hold me to it. I don't think they've barely broke a magnitude of 4. What I am concerned about is the what's taking place, not so much around the the Indian Ocean, and more concerned about what's taking place in the Pacific. And I'll tell you why. Because you don't really appreciate it when you look at a map like this, how big the Pacific Ocean is. But just to give you a for instance, from this point here to this point over here is around 12,000 miles. That's half the circumference of the Earth. So we're looking at activity that is mainly taking place on one side of the Earth. Now that's what I'm more concerned about, and the level of increasing volcanic activity and earthquakes around that region. We've always had, that's why I said in the Indian Ocean, the ring of fire and irregular earthquakes and volcanic activity, but it seems to have been on the last at least 5 to 10 years increasingly becoming more popular for volcanoes to be erupting around this region on the Pacific. Now, like I said, at first glance on this map, it doesn't appear to reveal the picture. But what we're looking at is half of the Earth seems to be active with regards to the other half relatively inactive. Now, that, I think, is of concern. Not only is that of concern, but the level and amount of volcanic eruptions that are actively taking place as we speak right now, guys. Why is that of concern? Well, because we don't need a Yellowstone eruption to throw up that much volcanic ash where it can cause a GMS reduction, or a global mean surface temperature reduction, or a reduction in the surface temperature over the Earth. We don't need just one supervolcano to erupt because a multitude of small ones will deliver the same effects, and that's what we're looking at. Now, when you compare this on the wider scale, not only have we got lots of these smaller but significant volcanoes erupting, we've also got a very lame sunspot solar cycle. Solar cycle 24 is dropping off on a trend over the last 3 cycles. We can see that solar cycle 22, solar cycle 23 and solar cycle 24 have gradually been dropping off, and that in itself can cool the temperature of the Earth. But adding to that, we have these volcanoes on a large amount erupting. And the strange thing is here, guys, is that it is taking place on one side of the Earth. Now, there's something that you might not have heard someone mention to you before, but as you can see, it's the case. If I was to go onto Google Earth and just show you the distance between, the, say, Chile and Japan, it would be around about 10 to 12,000 miles. And if we've got a circumference of 24,000 miles, you know that one half of this Earth, at this very precise moment, is active. And that's what I'm interested in. I want to know why that one side of the Earth is so active. What is the mechanisms behind that? Why are we getting that only on the one side of the Earth? What's going on perhaps in the interior of the Earth around the core that is producing this outgassing, if you like? Has the core of this Earth heated up? That's the question. And I think if we look at some of the experiments we conducted with regards to the magnetic anomalies when it's heated up. When you heat up any magnetic material up, it loses its magnetic ability. And we know over the last 100 years that the Earth's had a weakening magnetic pole, and also magnetosphere, or the magnetic field of the Earth has been weakening. So, that's what I'm concerned of. Now, do I think that this evidence is building up in favour for the core temperature increasing? Well, I do. For one, we've got outgassing more than we've had with volcanoes. We've got, I would classify an increase in in earthquake activity, slight destabilisation. Although continents aren't shifting, I would still say that we are probably building up to, worst case scenario. That being the case, somewhere down the future line, and we've got a migrating magnetic pole. All, I would presume, are related to an increase in temperature, perhaps in the core. We know the sun's surface temperature is increasing by around about 45K per year, and it's having a reduction in the magnetic ability for sunspots to form, because the surface of the sun's heating up, and it's weakening the ability for these sunspots to form. So we know that heat and magnetic ability on the sun, at least, the two go in hand, and I can't see why what we're seeing here is not the case as well. So we've got something, that may well be affecting all the planets within our solar system. We have, for instance, delivered some facts to support that. We've seen the lower belts disappear off Jupiter. We've seen the magnetic pole on the Earth start to migrate over the last 100 years, increasing volcanic activity and increasing magnitude of earthquakes and frequency. We've also seen the main driver of our solar system, the sun itself, increasing surface temperature and reducing magnetic ability to produce sunspots. So, I do believe, now I know his name's Paul. I know that Camelot interviewed him, and we should give this guy some credit, because he was talking about the superwave theory probably a lot longer than what I was, and I do agree with a lot of his work. So credit goes to him, and apologies for not knowing his surname. I know it's Paul somebody. Someone did mention it to me in a comment, I think, today. But I think that theory is looking like it's definitely something that holds weight, because whatever possibly is in that super wave, even if it's electromagnetic in nature, we're talking about an increase in energy in all the planets that get submerged in that wave. Now, I would say that when you increase energy at somewhere along the lines, it might produce an increase in heat. That is a theory, by the way, because unless we actually measure this wave, and we measure it against the increasing core temperature, which these things are very hard to do, we're not going to know for sure. But just looking at what we've got in front of us, we can get a good idea, and I think that is what we've got. If we use common sense, we can see that there's a large amount of volcanoes erupting. We can see that there's an incredible amount of earthquakes, and even on the higher ends of magnitudes erupting daily, and we've got a weakening magnetic field. So I think if you put all the three together, it starts to look like that theory of superwave could be true. So that with regards to Yellowstone, and when you compare it with what is actually taking place, I feel at the moment Yellowstone is an important place to observe, but I think with what we've got here, it's enough. And the fact that it only appears to be on one side of the Earth now, that has got to be the important factor here. that I think a lot of people are missing the point on. You know, this is just happening mainly on the one side of the Earth, you know, on those.
We see the region of our planet. No one has ever seen this place. Yet what happens here affects every one of us, every day of our lives. It's 2,000 miles beneath our feet. The Earth's molten core. Here, a vast ocean of liquid iron generates an invisible force. The Earth's magnetic field. It's what makes our compasses point north, but it does a lot more. It helps to keep the Earth a living planet. Our neighbors, Venus and Mars, have only weak magnetic fields, which means they're unprotected from the deadly radiation sweeping through the solar system. The Earth, on the other hand, exists within a vast magnetic cocoon. A force field that for billions of years has sheltered us on our journey through space. But now, scientists have made a startling discovery. It seems there's a storm brewing deep within the Earth. A storm that is weakening our vital magnetic shield.
It's the buzz when I'm full of your sweet magnetic pull.
The Earth's magnetic field has been our protector for millennia, and now it appears it's about to go away.
It's our
The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker rapidly.
We cannot guarantee that the magnetic field of the Earth is still going to be there 1,000 years from today.
Is our invisible shield about to disappear?
The question is not if that's going to happen, it's when that's going to happen.
Could the Earth really lose its magnetic field? And what will happen if it does? Up next on Nova, Magnetic Storm. Searing heat. Crushing pressure. And a billion trillion tons of molten iron. These are the conditions at the center of the Earth.
This is the Sparrows Point blast furnace for Bethlehem Steel Corporation, and this is as close to the environment of the Earth's core as we have here on the surface of the Earth.
Buried beneath nearly 2,000 miles of solid rock, the Earth's core is inaccessible to geophysicists like Peter Olson.
About halfway to the center of the Earth, we reach the true heart of the Earth's core. An immense molten sphere of liquid iron, and that's where the Earth's magnetic field is generated.
But recently, scientists have detected a dramatic change in the Earth's magnetic field. The core's ability to generate the field seems to be faltering.
Today, something very strange is going on with the Earth's magnetic field. Its strength is rapidly decreasing, so fast that at the current rate, it will last only into the next millennium.
It seems the Earth's magnetic field is rapidly fading. A puzzle that is challenging scientists around the globe.
It's quite surprising how little is understood about the Earth's magnetic field and how it's generated.
It was a very intriguing problem, something that was screaming out for an answer.
I often wished I could see the magnetic field. I'm motivated by the mysteries that are there.
As scientists grapple with the complexities of the magnetic field, they realize that what is happening at the center of the Earth could change our world for generations to come.
And we've always known it that way. North Pole's north, South Pole south. And so it is. But it may not have been that way forever, and there is significant scientific evidence, perhaps even conclusive, that there have been prior polar shifts. In other words, where north goes south and south goes north, right?
That's right.
Now,
absolutely.
Now, how many times in our Earth's history do we think this has occurred?
Well, it depends on the experts you look at, but from what we can gather, probably 7 to 8 times. They're just, I think partially they're guessing because of records, but it has happened a considerable number of times. From a biblical perspective, there is at least probably 2. I believe there was one before the creation of Adam and Eve that you'll find in Genesis. And then it appears as though when the time of Noah's flood came, that also may have incorporated at least a partial polar shift, if not a total one. And then a very interesting event occurred in the days of Peleg, which occurred maybe 250 to 300 years after the flood, in which it says the earth was divided, and that would have been a gigantic earthquake, which, according to the ancient records, set up the nations as we know them today.
The continents? Did it actually change continental formations? I mean, all right, well, let's get down to it. What do we think occurs? Oh, God, so many questions. First of all, how quick would a polar reversal occur?
Well, the actual polar reversal, from what we can gain from the scriptures and from other documents, ancient documents, it occurs very rapidly, usually within a one-day period. So it occurs when it finally goes, it goes extremely rapidly.
A one-day period?
Yes.
And in one day, the North Pole goes to roughly the South Pole or some new location, and South goes to North?
Yes.
Okay, if that were to occur, what is our best guess about what would happen?
Total destruction, basically. It would depend on where you were on the Earth's surface at the time the shift occurred, the direction of the shift.
Let's say I'm in Nevada.
I would think from the prophecies you'd be in a lot of trouble.
Well, what do you mean?
I think everybody in the United States of America is going to be in a lot of trouble because a shift.
Define trouble.
Destruction.
You mean dead?
Death, yes.
Well, what would kill us?
Well, let me just quote you from Isaiah, for example. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof.
Okay, translate that into what that might mean scientifically.
Well, scientifically, that would mean that in a very short period of time, the North Pole becomes the South Pole, and actually probably goes beyond it.
Sure.
Because...
no, but I mean effects. When that happened, what...
Total destruction.
By what means?
By means of, well, shall we say, outside... almost outer space, cold, coming down to the surface. The scriptures indicate a tremendous roll cloud develops. If you've seen major squall lines, you've seen these roll clouds.
Oh, listen, brother, I used to chase them.
Right.
I chased them looking for tornadoes, so yes, I'm extremely familiar with a roll cloud.
Okay, now multiply that roll cloud by a tremendous margin, because what happens is the surface of the Earth changes directions rapidly, but the atmosphere above it does not.
Wait a minute. The surface of the Earth changes directions.
Right. In a shift, the Earth is tilted at approximately 22.5, 23.5 degrees.
Right.
All right. Now, when a shift occurs, that tilt, the Earth, the North Pole, starts to slide to the south. Now, as it slides to the south, it is fairly solid, so the crustal part of the Earth just simply slides. But the Earth, or the atmosphere, does not catch up with it. It doesn't just move with it.
Oh, my God. You know, I once had somebody on here talking about polar shift, and he said there would be 100-mile-per-hour winds.
Oh, I would think probably at least that, probably even more.
And so, if I just heard you correctly, you're saying the Earth's surface would move, but the atmosphere wouldn't. The net effect, though, would be atmosphere moving by us, or us actually, it wouldn't make any difference. The net effect would be stupendous winds.
Yes. Yes. In fact, the atmosphere would actually begin to roll back as the surface of the Earth accelerates in the shift. Because the atmosphere cannot keep up with it. It begins to roll back, and it creates a huge vacuum area.
For the first time, I understand this.
And then air from the outer space comes down because it's super cold, and you have instant freeze of anything that happened to be there that would...
I take it you mean actually upper atmosphere,
yes.
the very thinner, very cold upper atmosphere.
Yes.
Anybody who's ever been in an airplane, one of the recent 747s, when you look at the outside temperature and you're only at like 40,000 feet, the outside temperature is like minus 80, minus 90 degrees typically.
Yeah, it gets pretty chilly up there.
Just that far up. So further up in the atmosphere, of course, it's if that were to suddenly come down...
Well, you have instant freeze, which probably explains the findings in Siberia and whatnot.
You mean the vegetation in the woolly mammoths?
Yes. Yes. Instant freeze. They were quick frozen in a split second. The only thing that would do that is super cold air approaching, because of wind chill factors.
And it would have to be very fast.
Oh, instantaneous. They would never know what hit them. Nobody would know what hit them. There will be warning signs.
Like what?
Well, we're already getting the warning signs. We're seeing changes in the weather patterns. The patterns are getting more and more violent.
Boy, I'll tell you, there's no question about that.
I think we're in the preliminary stages of a polar shift.
Now, let me tell you a little story. This is a true story. I could read it because I've got it here somewhere, but I know it by heart. The Fujita scale of tornadoes actually goes to 12, but that's just an academic study.
Mm-hmm.
On Earth, in our atmosphere, it is impossible to have any, the scientists say anyway, meteorologists, impossible to have anything greater than what's called an F5 tornado at 318 miles per hour. Now, that's exactly what we had, was 318 miles per hour. That is the top, the very tip-top of the F5 scale. At 319, which, by the way, they think they might have actually had, you would have an F6. And they say that's impossible. And yet, it occurred. And everybody who's been watching the weather maps knows the horrendous tornado season that we've had. And you're saying this is a harbinger.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's going to increase tremendously.
Then there's one more thing. And I've been dealing with this on my show now for 2 years. So I'll tell you about it. You can tell me if it means anything, Stewart. But from time to time, I will suddenly start getting all these emails and faxes, and people will start saying to me, hey, Art, guess what? My compass is suddenly deviating anywhere between 8 to 15 degrees west. And it's freaky. It's like the pole is wandering a little bit, and then it comes back.
Mm-hmm. Well, a magnetic pole shift probably will precede the actual literal pole shift. When the magnetic poles shift and go into, I guess what you could call them a dipolar reversal, there is a period of time in which the magnetic field actually collapses, according to the scientists that have studied this.
In other words, goes to zero.
Goes to zero. During that time, of course, you have all the lethal rays from the sun, et cetera, your orbital mass ejections and all that.
Nothing to protect you from them, right?
That's right, because it's the magnetic field that actually does most of the protecting, which is one of the reasons why your satellites or manned satellites are below the Van Allen belt, because they're protected by the Van Allen belt itself from the more lethal rays of the sun.
So if suddenly it went to zero, in essence, we would be immediately particularly if it's a bad solar cycle time, which, by the way, we happen to be coming up on.
Yes.
A solar maximum, they say, perhaps within the next year, you would then be wide open to a coronal mass ejection that could flip the poles?
Yes. Well, I don't know if it would actually literally create the polar shift, but it could certainly rearrange the magnetic poles tremendously. And there are some scientists that have done some research on this, and they claim that when the poles go to zero, that it has tremendous effects upon the Earth, great shaking of the Earth, and then it reorientates itself, and the North Pole becomes the South Pole, et cetera, et cetera.
Stewart, I have a fellow I interview from time to time named Major Ed Dames from SciTech, which is a remote viewing organization. He has remote viewed something that he calls a kill shot from the sun. And it sounds an awful lot like what you're talking about.
Could well be. There's no question that the sun is involved in this, because the time of the polar shift, according to the scriptures, and the time of a solar nova are the same. The Bible indicates in the Old Testament that the moon will give off the light of the sun, and the sun will give off 7 times the light it has now. Now, that can only be described as a mini nova.
You know, it's interesting you should mention this, because I've been reading these stories just in the last few days about scientists seeing these suns go into this apparent nova condition a lot lately. I mean, they've got all kinds of new information about it, and if other suns can do it, I mean, our sun is not that unusual.
That's right.
It could do it too, couldn't it?
It not only could, according to the prophecies, it will. And actually, the way the Lord worded it, he said the heavens will be shaken, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. In other words, things sort of go off from their normal course. The book of Enoch says the moon shall change its laws and not be seen for its proper period.
Would anybody on Earth live through such an event?
Yes, there are survivors. According to the scriptures, there are survivors.
Well,
not many.
How about scientifically? I don't in any way put down the scriptures, and I realize you're coming at this from a Christian perspective, which is fine. But scientifically, if what you suggest occurred, how would anybody live?
I think, again, it would depend on your location upon the planet in relationship to the spin of the polar shift itself. In other words, if you were in an area where you were sort of in the pivot area, probably not a whole lot would happen to you. But those on the outside of the shift, you see, would have tremendous damage.
Oh, I absolutely do see. In other words, inside you would hardly feel the motion. Outside, you'd be thrown from here to Kalamazoo.
Yes.
All right, hold on, Stewart. Stewart Best is my guest, and we'll be right